Yes, Guyana to the world.
Globuspan is a Guyanese dialogue moving towards the realization of one nation in one Guyana. It's a platform that offers an all-inclusive discussion with the pros, the cons, the ones that is taken aside, and the ones that stand in the middle. Globuspan believes agreeing and disagreeing are part of the nation's building.
She is a beauty, beautiful Guyana, with wonderful people all over this country.
Globuspan believes every Guyanese voice is part of the nation's building. As we span the globe for voices from the diaspora and those living home, we stand on our commitment that we are all Guyanese working towards one nation in one Guyana. As the world turns on its axis bringing changes, we as Guyanese must adapt to those changes for a better Guyana for all. Globuspan stands on its axis with its belief that one nation, one Guyana, one destiny must include voices from all corners of Guyana.
With many flavors, 6 different people blended together. Raise your flag high in unity, we're family with one destiny. Raise your flag high in unity.
Good evening and welcome to tonight's edition of Globuspan. My name is Rushad Ramgopal. I'll be your moderator for this evening, where our focus will be on the 2024 U.S. elections and the role of the West Indian diaspora. We are joined by some esteemed panelists, and we'll have another one join on later. I'll introduce them. We have Mr. Albert Baldio, who most of our viewers are familiar with, but I'll give him the proper introduction. He was one of the youngest lawyers and magistrate court judges in Guyana, and is one of the most experienced Indo-Caribbeans in U.S. Democratic Party politics, with his involvement in New York politics spanning many decades, in roles such as being a Democratic Party district leader, and in 2006 coming the closest that any Indo-Caribbean ever has come to winning a major legislative office in New York City, winning 49% of the vote in a race for the New York State Senate. So we're very glad to have him on, because our focus tonight will be about getting out the vote in New York, and we wanted representation from across the political spectrum. So we're very glad that Mr. Baldio is on as a Democratic leader here in New York. We are also joined by Mr. Tom Sullivan, and will later be joined by Mr. Paul King. Mr. Tom Sullivan is a retired colonel in the U.S. Army who served in the Persian Gulf War and in other total combat in the Middle East as well. He is dedicated to public service. He comes from a family of policemen, firefighters, etc. In 2022, he had a very, very close race, and that's why I'm very glad to have him on, because we can highlight the importance of every vote counts, because you have so many people in the city and the state who feel like their vote may not count, and that's why they don't come out and vote. But in 2022, Tom Sullivan's race was decided by a margin of 15 votes. So just think about that number, 15 votes. That's how much it can take to tip a race one way or the other in New York. His race is expected to be one of the closest in New York again, as he's running for the New York State Assembly, and his district encompasses part of the Ozone Park area where much of the West Indian diaspora is as well. We want to have him on tonight so the viewers in the area are able to get to know him, and he knows our community as well before the November election. So, and later we will also be joined by Mr. Paul King, who is a nominee for U.S. Congress in Queens this year, because when people go out to vote this year, they will not just be voting for president, but they will also be voting for down ballot races, state legislature and the U.S. Congress. And in those areas, your vote can actually make the difference one way or the other. And that is what we will be discussing with our panel tonight. So, Mr. Baldio, I'll give you the chance for any opening remarks that you may have. And one thing I want to say before we get started is, and you have to be very careful with these things now with the way partisanship is here. But Mr. Baldio is here out of bipartisan nature, a graciousness. He knows that this program will have some Republicans on, but he is here because not to endorse any Republican or anything like that, but he's here in a nonpartisan way, a civic duty to encourage people to get out and vote. Because the most important thing is not whether you vote Democrat or Republican, but just get out to vote, period. Because so many times, especially in this South Queens area, the people just don't get out and vote, and then they complain later, oh, this is not getting done, that's not getting done. But you have to get civically involved, make your voices heard, and engage in the voting process in order to see change done in the end. So without further ado, I'll give chance to our panelists to give their opening remarks. Please, Mr. Bolio.
Well, thank you very much, Rousset. It's a pleasure to be on the show. I want to thank Mr. Sullivan for his service to our country. And of course, like you rightly said, this is a bipartisan event. We are all Americans, proud Americans. We have a civic duty to vote. And this is where we have to make sure that our community comes out and vote, exercise our franchise. Many folks who have come to this country have not realized, new Americans, that people have died for the right to vote. People have struggled in the past. People never had that right, women and so forth. Eventually now, everyone has a right to vote. So it's a very sacred duty. And it should come as an automatic thing. And of course, the system takes stock of who votes. Not who you vote for, but who votes. And the community that votes gets the most resources. And this is the basic message I want to bring out to our viewers, especially those looking, you have to go out and vote. Of course, your vote is your own personal choice, and I recognize that. And I'm not here to have any ask you to vote for anyone in particular, but you make that judgment, and then there are issues on the ballot also. Another important thing that we have to understand is that America needs to have more bipartisanship. It doesn't matter whether we're Republican or a Democrat. We've got to understand that we have to work together. We have to be there for each other. And there's no, as I've always said, and I've always been told by folks before me who have held office, there's no Republican way or Democratic way, or working families way, of conservative way, of fixing the potholes, of building more schools for our society, of giving better jobs, of ensuring that it's civil rights, and ensure that we have more police on the streets, we have more law enforcement, and that we have together to move up in broad prosperity. So I respect everyone who's running. I wish them well. But I also direct my message to those who are looking on and listening. You have to go out and vote. This community, especially since this caters to a West Indian community, Rousset, has failed in its duty to vote. It has failed its children. It has failed the taxes and the kind of sacrifices that the foreparents made for them. And they've just treated it as something that has no consequence. And in their own countries, they never used to vote, and hence that is what has been affecting us. It also affects how much resources come our community, how much allocation we get, how much respect we get, and then at the end of the day, an employer, a lot of folks don't know this, gentlemen. Some employers actually pull up your voting card before they hire you because it won't say who you vote for, but as you gentlemen would know, having run for office before, it's public record that you can go and get the buff card or the voting record of any person. So an employer may say, you know what, if this person can't even vote, why should I hire them? Why should I care about them if they don't even care about the rights that others died for them? So think about that. Think about all these things and it comes together. It just takes 5 minutes to go to the polling site, exercise your franchise, be proud Americans, go about your duties after that, but at least devote that 5 minutes to your kids, to your family, and go out and vote. It's the most fundamental thing you do. And the great thing is, gentlemen, it is free. It is free. We don't have to pay anything to vote. And that is why they must take advantage of it. Sometimes when things cost us, Rousset, then we think, well, oh, this thing is valuable. But because voting is free, it's hard to say this. Some people take it for granted. And that's an utter shame. I'm proud to say I vote in each and every election in this country since I was eligible many decades ago. And I'm proud to say that. And I'm sure you gentlemen have done it also. So that's my opening remarks. The sacred right to vote and the duty to vote is very, very important.
Thank you, Mr. Bollier. Mr. Sullivan, I'll give you the chance for your opening remarks, but I want to focus the question to you also on what Mr. Baldy was touching on just now. We have an area in Queens that has such low turnout historically, and your race in 2022 highlights just how much that may come to cost us. Your race, I think it's one of the closest races of 15 vote difference. So we could focus on that end and your record of public service. You're serving our country. We thank you for your service. I'll give you the chance to give your opening remarks, and then we'll follow up with telling people also what are the district lines, and we'll get into how the district is gerrymandered a certain way and whatnot. But Tom Sullivan is the Republican and Conservative Party nominee for New York State Assembly in the 23rd District, which encompasses much of the Rockaways, Breezy Point, growing up Cross Bay all the way to Howard Beach and Ozone Park. So without further ado, Mr. Tom Sullivan.
Good evening, Rousset, and thank you for giving us an opportunity to engage with the community. on a most important issue and one of the greatest rights we have as Americans. And thank you, Mr. Baldeo, for joining in. It's a pleasure meeting you in this forum. So regarding, going out to vote, my recommendation and advice is don't feel intimidated by the process. There's no wrong or right answer. When you go in there, there's plenty of help and resources if maybe there's a language barrier or you're not familiar with the process. The bipartisanship with the Board of Elections, they're there to help you. So don't be intimidated. Come on out and vote. It's a great feeling to know that you've participated in the democratic process. It's a great feeling to know that I voted, so now I get to voice my opinion more often and engage in discussion. So absolutely, come on out. Plenty of time left. Take advantage of the early voting in case something happens in your life, which it always does. And listen, and I just advise you, take an opportunity to do a little research on the candidates, right? Some people feel very strongly about their party. I don't always take great comfort in that. I'd rather somebody be able to learn about somebody's experience and their education and their character, and to make a better informed decision when it comes time to vote. And we don't want to always push party lines per se. We just want the best candidate that will do right for you and your community. And the truth of the matter is, Republican or Democrat, we certainly feel a lot of the issues are the same, right? We want good quality education for our children. We want safe neighborhoods. We want good economic opportunities. Good quality, those things add up to a quality of life issues, we call them, right? So it's just sometimes we may disagree on how to get there. But that's okay. That's what makes America so great. And this is your opportunity to have your voice heard, and the best to everybody.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sullivan. So actually, we'll put up a few pictures on the screen that can illustrate the points that we want to make tonight. Devin, if you could pull up the article from the city that covers Tom Sullivan's race when you have a chance, between him and his opponent, who's Stacey Pfeffer Amato. And I want to elaborate more on the point that Mr. Sullivan made just now. Get to know the people who are running for office for each level on the ballot, and see who is getting to know your community or not, right? So we have here, the city has covered that Assembly District 23, you have the incumbent, who is Stacey Pfeffer Amato, versus Tom Sullivan, military veteran and financial advisor Tom Sullivan. That this race was decided by only 15 votes in 2022, and now we're ready for a rematch. And sometimes people, they don't even vote for the down ballot races, but those down ballot races, like state assembly, are where your vote can have the most impact, because everybody's going out to vote for Trump or Biden, or Trump or Harris this time, or the governor race was seen Zeldin and Hochul. The changes that your state assembly person is going to make when they're in office can actually affect your local life more than what a president or a governor does. For example, the state assembly, everybody living in New York has complained about crime recently. The state assembly and the state legislature is the one that passed the bail reform a few years ago that helped contribute to some of the quality of life and crime issues that we see right now. And then people complain, oh, but I never voted for that. But in a way, you did vote for that, because you voted for the state assembly that did that. So it's up to you now to get out and vote and know the issues, know the people running for these local offices, like the state legislative offices, to actually have an impact there. And I want to address this thing that people say, my vote doesn't count. Your vote counts for those issues more than anything else. Your vote in New York probably won't make the difference between who becomes the next president. but your vote, especially in Queens, where we have some very close races, can make the difference between who goes to Albany and represents you at the state level or not. And the two gentlemen on this panel right now illustrate that more than most, and for an unfortunate reason, in the sense that their races came down to such tight margins, and as a result of that, unfortunately, people didn't get the representation that they would have had otherwise. We could pull up here. We have a New York Times article covering Mr. Baldio's race back in 2006, which his race was covered by the most famous paper in the world, the New York Times, because how close it ended up being. So when you have we got that here. The New York Times, November 2006, a curious lack of interest in a Senate seat in Queens. And it covers the fact that the race between Mr. Baldio and then State Senator Surfin Maltese was such a close race. And it was covered thereafter that there was a curious lack of interest. Why weren't people interested enough to come out and vote in this area of Queens? And obviously, we talked about Mr. Sullivan's race. 15 votes can make all the difference. And Mr. Baldio's race was, less than 1% difference, right, in the end. So these races are very close. Your vote can make all the difference in that. And that's why we're encouraging people to abandon this history of low voter turnout in this area and get out and vote. And we talk about the apathy. There's also early voting now, which you didn't have back in 2006, right? So make a plan to get out and vote. We have a lot of early voting sites in the area. You have Resorts World Casino that's opened up, York College, the Richmond Hill Library, and you can go. In fact, you can go right now. It's open until 8 p.m. on the weekdays. It's open on the weekends as well, so you can go take the family and get on vote and vote with them as well. Because there's no excuse not to get on vote nowadays. Now I've talked for a while there, but before I redirect to our panelists again, I want the viewers to know what areas we're talking about. For example, when we talk about Mr. Sullivan's race. So I think we have the map of the Assembly District. Assembly District 23 is what Mr. Sullivan is running for. So when you see that map, you can know if you live in his area, whether you can vote for him or not. And he has a piece of Ozone Park in there. So if you see that, it has the Rockaways in there, Howard Beach, and at the top, and Devin, I think we also have the image zoomed in of that Ozone Park area he has. He has a piece of Ozone Park in that district, and these districts are very broad, very wide, and they're drawn in very weird ways, which we call gerrymandering. These are gerrymandered districts, and it can be hard for somebody to campaign and crisscross that area and cover all of that. But that's what people like Mr. Sullivan, in their public service of running, have attempted to do or chosen to do. And we wanted to give them the opportunity tonight to get to reach, especially that West Indian area in Ozone Park, that immigrant community area, and try to reach out to them. So, Mr. Sullivan, with the points I just made, that you may want to hit on a few of that too. What is your message to the voters in that particular Ozone Park area to get out and vote?
Yes. So, you mentioned I was in the military for 30 years, and one of the things that brought for me in my experiences, engaging with people of every faith, nationality, issues in Far Rockaway, right? Like overdevelopment, maybe some crime issues in certain areas, certainly flood mitigation, infrastructure, lack of transportation. Right, so that might be some of the important concerns, right? Those are the local issues that you were referring to, with why it's so important to vote for your state assembly and state senate candidates, because we will help bring direction and money into those districts for those different needs. So if you move up into the northern part of this particular district in Ozone Park, I try to avoid Linden Boulevard because of how bad the road is and the damage it does to the car. So we're back to infrastructure, right? So regardless, Republican, Democrat, we need good infrastructure. That's a quality life issue, and one of those are the roads. And that means bringing back money, federal dollars, state dollars, your tax money back to your district for certain issues like that. And I know there's been significant increase in auto theft is a particular crime. And that's a quality of life issue too, because you come home from work, you go to walk to your car, or you wake up in the morning and it's not there. It's depressing, right? To have your personal property stolen or damaged. It's very intrusive. So we need to work together, Republicans and Democrats and our state assembly and legislature, to fix those, so that the sentiment with the public, they just become happier and they become more confident in their elected officials that they have their best interest. So faith. We want to be able to practice our faith without any form of retribution or bias. And I know that's important to the Hindu and the Muslim communities up in that particular area. And one of the blessings that I've had as a candidate, and I'm, to the point I was making with the military, is it's been so nice engaging with different cultures and different faiths that you may not have, in my locality, right? Because maybe I live in an area where more people look like me or practice the same faith. And you know this about me, Rusat. I don't speak any foreign languages, which is a regret in my life. But I like every kind of food out there in the world, and I love being up on Liberty Avenue or 101st Avenue and getting into whether it's a Guyanese or an Indian restaurant. It's been wonderful, and it gets noticed, and it makes people feel comfortable that you're willing to sit down with them, that you're willing to walk in their neighborhood and engage with them on the street. So that's people I know may not love politics, and it can be hard and difficult, that's for sure, but there can be so many rewards too. Whether you're a civic leader, a district leader, or an elected official in the state legislature, there's so many positive things, and I would like your listeners to know that it's not all bad.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. And before I go to Mr. Baldy, I'll just ask you a quick follow-up. You talked about, and I've seen you personally. I can say to the audience, I've been there in a roti shop with Mr. Sullivan, and he will go up and order an aloo pie, and he'll just scarf that down. It's you would think that he's born in Trinidad or Guyana the way he eats it so naturally. So I've seen his appreciation for the cuisine and for the community. And what I would ask you as an interesting question, because I'm going to ask Mr. Baldio about the gerrymandering, because he has been very involved over the years in the community, but as an activist and political leader in talking about this issue. It's unfortunate that the lines are gerrymandered in this weird way, that you have a district that goes, Ozone Park to Breezy Point to Far Rockaway on the other end. And it can be a challenge, but it can be a blessing at the same time, too, because as a candidate, it's giving you the chance to experience so many different areas. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about the experience of having to campaign to, say, Italian Americans in Howard Beach, Guyanese or Indian Americans in Ozone Park, Black Americans in Far Rockaway. And how sometimes, even though we may seem so different, there are so many similarities. Our love of food, our family values when it comes to our faith, whatever religious background we may be. You may have Guyanese Hindus and Muslims, or Italian American Christians, or Black American Christians, who may seem so different but have so many similar values at the same time. I'm just wondering, have you gotten to see that transversing the district?
That was directed towards me, correct? Yeah. So right. You can set the boundaries to a neighborhood, but especially up in the northern part, like Ozone Park and Richmond Hill and parts of Lindenwood and Howard Beach, right? The lines may stay the same for a while, but the area starts to change around the original lines, right? Somebody drew those lines however many years ago for a reason. maybe to get more Republicans or more Democrats, based on registration. But again, I think it's a positive when the neighborhood changes around you, around those original district lines. New cultures, new religion, certainly new restaurants. So, what we put in place, 10 years ago, is not the same anymore. So it forces the candidates. I would never want to change my principles or my beliefs just to fit a certain part of the district, and that's the education that I'm getting from coming into different neighborhoods and meeting different people, and that just makes all of us as a society, as our individual communities, that we can celebrate our heritage, our faith, our politics, and without being too divisive.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. And I'll just say, in terms of Mr. Sullivan's dedication to reaching out to the diverse community, and it's a representation of the diversity of New York City. I'll just say he's joining this program right now from his car, and the reason he's doing that is because he's still out on the campaign trail right now this time of night, but he's still making the time to reach out to our community here. Now, Mr. Baldi, we talked on a lot of topics just now, and I'm sure you'll have some thoughts on those. So I'll give you your chance now, and also I want to ask you in particular your thoughts on the gerrymandering, and we'll show a diagram and picture just now later, because you've been very active on this issue for many years. It takes place after the census every 10 years. You have a redistricting process, and both after the 2010 census and after the 2020 census, you're around on this issue, and I think even going back before. So I know a lot about the issue of the redistricting and that process. So I'll just give you a chance to talk about these issues from gerrymandering to early voting and low turnout and apathy. And your thoughts. We referenced that election, the history that you made way back when in 2006, and anything that may have come to mind with that, because you were very much ahead of your time. If you think about it, we could have had representation in the state senate with you for this community nearly 20 years ago. So I just want to give you a proper chance to give any thoughts you may have on the issues we talked about just now.
Yes, that has never left me, because it has left it's burnt a memory that it was so possible, and that would have been the first time that we had representation. When I came out, I didn't have the backing of my local Democratic Party. As a matter of fact, they were backing Surf Maltese. And it just goes to show that this partisan politics is not something we should engage in, because sometimes it does not suit or help the folks, the common folks. So that's a point I wanted to make. As a matter of fact, there were folks at that point in time who actually endorsed Maltese over me. Some of whom Mr. Sullivan may be coming up against, that sort of thing. If you imagine that, Rusat. So, they were all scared, or for whatever reason, I was like a stepchild. I was an orphan child. I'll tell you how I felt. I felt very bad. I kept plugging away, and it left a deep memory with me that politics is a very dirty business, and it's not necessarily something that helps everyone. It's very much a sort of an insider game, so to speak, to the detriment of people's involvement. But I've stuck with it, and I fought. I've had to win all my races to become district leader several times in different assembly districts. As a matter of fact, my assembly district, of which I'm district leader, is neighboring to Mr. Sullivan's. So I'm glad that he is there. So in the event that we have to work together, and we must always continue to work together, civic-minded folks, where in a bipartisan way, we can achieve many results and many issues. So I know the key to that is to invite him for some good roti or good curry.
Oh, yeah.
And we have very fine cuisines in Liberty, so we can break bread there. So I'm very happy for that. But coming back to that, Rusat, there was an arrangement between Democrats and Republicans in Maltese And Maltese used to like not run candidates against the Democrats and vice versa and that sort of thing. So I broke up the whole party. But my issue was that then I brought an insider, who was, everyone knows, the public record reveals, is Joe Dabo, who was able to inherit all the work that I'd put in. And I was sort of like, some people said put on ice, some people say kick to the curb, some people say dumped under the bus. You can say it what it is, but I've kept fighting. Now, coming back to redistricting, I agree with what Mr. Sullivan is saying, but here's the thing. With us now, we have been used as filler, and we've been divided into many different segments. And one of the core principles of redistricting, as a legally trained man, I would tell you that it's supposed to have a community of interest together, like how we have Little Guyana, that is supposed to be kept together. And again, we were shortchanged. As a matter of fact, the Independent Redistricting Commission had Republicans and Democrats, and Republicans, to their credit, voted to keep Little Guyana together with some Democrats. And that was a very great example of bipartisanship, that they kept their word and they stuck to what they're supposed to do. And I was very happy to see that. And that's why I don't always go, well, oh, I'm a diehard Democrat or I'm a diehard this or that. We don't have the place for that in politics. We have to work together and get the best out of each other and respectfully disagree where we can and find common ground. Now, coming back to that issue, Rusat, is that this community of interest was deprived of us for a long time. So perhaps Little Guyana should be really that part of Ozone Park, South Ozone Park, and Richmond Hill put together. That is the solid voting bloc. People of common heritage, people of common ancestry, people of common dreams, and so forth should all be kept together so that they can have a voice. As it is, we've been segmented into 8, and I've been following this for 3 decades, and now we segmented. As you know, Liberty Avenue now has been divides the whole city council district. The Van Wyck there to the Assembly District has been divided, and hence you had the chairman was changed, a gentleman by the name, I don't know if they call him a gentleman, but I'm very upset with him, and many people should, who believe in civic justice. Ken Jenkins, when he took over the map that had been consensually agreed by both Republicans and Democrats, and you had very, very prominent folks from both sides. They were able to draw a map together that made us whole. As a matter of fact, I think you showed a picture of, or both of us were behind a picture of that solid map, a nice square map. That same map there, that same map, you and me are holding that map. That was granted to us, preliminary passed. And then Jenkins, I think you were there at the time, maybe Malcolm Smith is in the room and whatever transpired. But then they took it away from us. They took it away from us so they can have this incumbency protection system, which is very bad for politics and for people and for democracy. So now you had the antithesis of democracy coming into play by these folks. And you had the person before, Mr. David Iamura, and the Republican and Democrats Independent Redistricting Committee had suddenly approved that map. And at the 11th hour, as you remember, Rusad, so bitterly, they pulled the rug from our feet. They pulled it from us and separated us again. That was one of the saddest days in a local democracy. And again, I'm witness to all these things. When I was pushed out of the race, I was declared a winner as a state senator. And then overnight, it was changed. The actual exit polls are declared me the first state senator from our origins and so forth in 2004. But then 2006, sorry. And then the very next morning, I said, no, that Surf Maltese had won by 0.5% of 500 votes. And then, that like I told you, I was kicked to the curb, but I still kept fighting. And injustice was done. Then you had this party, and now with gerrymandering for 3 decades, this has been going on, where our communities continue to be divided. So these are some grave injustices that have been perpetrated in our community, and we've been cruelly exploited in that. And I just hope and pray that justice will be done, that democracy will be served, and that at the end of it, in a bipartisan manner, we can gather enough support. And that is why Mr. Sullivan can be very helpful, should he be elected in situations like these, to ensure that justice is done to the West Indian and Caribbean South Asian community be kept whole. And that is one of the great things of having a bipartisan relationship with lawmakers, so that there's no monopoly. Listen, I'm a district leader. Sometimes when you call some folks' offices, they don't even return your call. They say they're going to circle back to you. They're going to get back to you. You can imagine what happens when the common folk, the ordinary folk, call, whether they will serve them. So this whole monopoly and power and influence has got to stop, because it has been abused cruelly and certainly in our districts, you've had families who have held, monopoly in power. You've had the weapons, you've had the adabos. It's not a good thing for democracy. And one may even say in Mr. Sullivan's case, you had the Pfeffers too. So, I mean, I know these folks. I work with them. We have a good relationship, but um, coming from my inner soul, it's not something that I would like. I believe in term limits also, that it should be term limits for the better good of the community and not for any particular individual. I would put that on the record, yes. And I would tell them that to their faces. I mean, some folks don't like when you go against that. But at the same time, we've got to think of the whole. We've got to think of serving folks, whether Republican, Democrat, working families, who, immigrant, whatever. We've got to treat everybody equally. And that is something that we have to be able to live with and abide with if we are going to move forward as a country.
Thank you, Mr. Baldio. Devin, if you'd mind putting back up the graphic that had the splitting up of the districts map along with Mr. Baldio. And I'll just say for those who may doubt whether how much Mr. Baldio talks about his activism, this is proof that that there's no doubt about his level of activism. Mr. Baldy doesn't even know where I got this image. This is on the state legislative website on redistricting. This is the image of him below the image of the fair redistricting map, because he was one of the lead advocates on that issue at the time. So if to explain this graphic, during the last redistricting cycle, so this is after the 2020 census, they redistrict the Congress and they redistrict the state legislature based on the new census numbers every 10 years. And our area of South Ozone Park, Richmond Hill, which is where most of the diaspora is, the focus of the program, we're talking about the role of the West Indian diaspora. Our area ended up being split into 4 different assembly districts. So Devin, if you could keep that up just a little bit more, sorry. Our area was split, there's a piece of it around the casino area, which is in Mr. Sullivan's Assembly District. There's a chunk of South Ozone Park, which is put in Assembly District 31, which is Khalil Anderson's district. So Mr. Sullivan is in 23, which is currently held by Pfeffer Amato. Assembly District 38, which is currently held by Jennifer Rajkumar, is a piece over there. And then Assembly District 24, which is currently held by David Weprin, is split into another chunk. And what was going on this time, this phrase community of interest that you heard Mr. Baldo talked about, we're trying to use the fact that this, South Asian Indo-Caribbean diaspora was a community of interest and deserved to be consolidated into a state assembly district, which if the other image showed with the two of us and that unity map, there would have been a consolidated district. But instead of that ended up happening, they kept the map with us split up into different districts. So when we talk about the role of the diaspora, had we been consolidated into one district, our role would have been, electing amongst our own probably, and a South Asian or Indo-Caribbean representative of that sort would have probably been elected there. Now, because we were split up, the role of the diaspora, it's very unlikely that a West Indian or South Asian, well, I shouldn't say South Asian because their numbers are a bit different, but it's very unlikely that a West Indian or particularly Indo-Caribbean would win one of those districts. So the role of the West Indian diaspora then becomes, okay, well, you cannot win those districts because you're split up, but you may not be the kings, but you can be the kingmakers. Your vote can make the difference in those district races, who wins and who doesn't. So like in the case of Mr. Sullivan's district, Assembly District 23, especially one that's so close, 15 votes makes all the difference in that assembly race. We have much more than 15 West Indians in that area. We have thousands of West Indians in that area. And those thousands of West Indians, if they actually turn out and vote and use the power of their vote and have their voices heard, can be the kingmakers one way or the other in a district like that, or any other assembly district that we're split into, or the other things, state senate, Congress, etc. So that's the role of our diaspora in the elections, especially in New York, where we have such our large community, that we can be the kingmakers in these such elections. So on that note, I'll give Mr. Sullivan a chance to redirect a message to that community as well. And Ms. Sullivan, I know you're out on the campaign trail, and we've taken a lot of your time so far. I know you had some time constraints earlier that we talked about. So if you do have to go sooner than later, I do understand and appreciate it. But I want to give you a chance refocus your message again to the community and encouraging them to get out and vote, because they can make all the difference in a race as close as yours, in a district like yours, where they are they form a chunk in that Ozone Park area.
Right. So I think my image froze up. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So, right, it's a tough dynamic. If we go ahead and we district, for particular parts of the communities, it could and probably would give more voice to have a representative from that area. But one of the challenges we always face, right, is we want to make sure we're integrating our communities as well. So, so as a candidate, I may come up, right, and I'm just using me as an example, and I'm not saying this is what I do, but naturally, if I come into the Guyanese community or the Hindu community or the West Indian community, as you mentioned, right, I am more likely to want to come up with language to appease, right? That's not me. And I think that approach of appeasement is not good. I want to be who I am, and I may not look like you. I may not be the same faith as you, but as I open this conversation with, we have very common interests in public safety and schools. So there's an argument for both. I certainly don't support how they broke up the community. And I do recall, because I haven't always been necessarily involved deep in politics. I've had other things in my life. But I am certainly aware of exactly what Mr. Baldeo spoke about. And I do recall not liking the way and the manner in which it was done, and with the intention of what it was done, right? And that goes to what you say is, why is this district drawn so awkwardly, right? It looks so weird on a map. And when you have political party operatives or the party people, and they say, hey, look, we have to carve this area out, or we have to just block this area in, I can't say I'm for that, right? I have faith in this government. I have faith in our democracy, that if we did something more fair and open-minded, that given the consideration of no matter what candidate, that we would, and I know life is not perfect, and we want to vote for like-minded people, but if it meant losing the election because I didn't have a certain demographic, I'm at peace with that. What I'm not at peace at is what I just discussed, is specifically targeting a certain faith or a certain culture or a certain background, right? I think things should be a little more natural and a little more partisan when it comes to that. And I think we would all be better off of that. It may not feel good or feel right, but I don't like when backroom deals are made to try and keep a certain part of our constituents boxed in, for the lack of a better term.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. And might I just say, to clarify, in case my question it came out the wrong way, in no way was I indicating that any difference in ethnic backgrounds reflects any ability to represent our people. And I would say that having seen Mr. Sullivan campaigning in this area, I've seen him do a lot of outreach to this area, and I think that his values are very much in line with the values of the people in his district, including the members of the West Indian diaspora that are in his area there in that Ozone Park area. And I would add on to that building on the points that we're saying that the district is split. So because the district is split, right? The Assembly District 23 area, which covers some of that Ozone Park West Indian diaspora, is currently represented by Stacey Pfeffer Amato. Now, most of Assembly District 23 is not the West Indian diaspora, but it has that piece of the West Indian diaspora.
Correct. Yeah.
Stacey Pfeffer Amato, from what I've seen her do very little effort while in office to reach out to that area and the West Indian diaspora there. But in his campaigning, I've seen Tom Sullivan do a lot of outreach to that area and to the people there. And he may not share the same ethnic background as those people, but he shares a lot of the same values as those people. And when it comes to the focus on quality of life issues, crime issues.
So could I interrupt you 1 second?
Yeah.
So I've had several comments. So like, if I go to the 102nd Community Council meeting, the precinct, right? I often get a comment that says, this is not in your district, right? And I said, yes, I understand, but it gives me a better understanding of of the cultures and the issues and the concerns. And if I'm eating in a certain restaurant, I've had someone say, oh, there's another restaurant over there in your district. And I had to say, well, I kind of like this one better. So I think it's important to engage. Look, even my own team says, hey, we don't need to go there. That's not our district. I said, let's branch out. Let's meet new people. Let's find out if we have common issues. It's important to the decisions we make as potential elected officials.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. And I was going to wrap up the point I was making by saying, look, neither Ms. Pfeffer Amato or Mr. Sullivan share the same ethnic background as the West Indian diaspora, but Mr. Sullivan, I see him doing his best in reaching out to that diaspora, and as I was saying, he shares a lot of the same values as that diaspora. So I was going to ask you the question there, in sort of a closing message to that diaspora. What values or issues would you want them to focus on that you may have in common with them as they go out to vote, and hopefully can make all the difference in your race?
So I think this is where I might delve into some of my political beliefs. So I worry in general, nationally and locally, that faith-based organizations in general, for the lack of a better word, are under attack or under scrutiny. And because they may vote a certain way, and I don't think that, I think there's a segment in our political organizations that say, hey, we can't have all the Catholics voting this way, or we can't have all the Muslims voting this way. Why? Because they believe in traditional family values, or they follow that faith, and they may listen to the imam, or they may listen to the rabbi, or they may listen to the priest. And they're trying to break up those blocks for political purposes. And I think it's an assault on faith. I think it's an assault on traditional family values. And that's the gist there with that. So.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. I know that we've taken up a lot of your time, and we have Mr. King joining in as well now. So if Mr. Sullivan, I know you're still on the campaign trail, so if you did need to switch out now or at some point later, we have Mr. King, who has joined us here. So Mr. King, Paul King, is the nominee for Congressional District 5. So when people go to vote, they will see president. They will also see the state legislative races, like talking about Mr. Sullivan and running for Assembly District 23. And we will you'll also see the congressional election going on. And that will encompass most of South Queens, the Congressional District 5. So we're glad to have Mr. King joining our program as well. And if you see, Mr. King's also joining on from his car because he's so dedicated to come on the program that he came while he was still on the campaign trail, even if he could join in virtually from his car. So we thank Mr. King for coming on.
So, Rusat, I will take this opportunity, but thank you for creating the platform. And Mr. Palteo, it was a pleasure listening to your perspective and hearing your knowledge of the community. And so we'll be seeing you soon, one way or the other.
I'll just give you a quick chance. Any final get out the vote message that you have to share, or any way people can follow your campaign?
No, I just really, I said it. Don't be intimidated by the process. Take part in our great democracy. Every vote does count, and I shouldn't even say it that way. Your vote counts, right? Your voice needs to be heard, and speak for your community and the values that matter most to you. Yeah. So thank you so much, and you have a wonderful evening.
On a jovial note, I'll say I've not just in this program, but I've seen Mr. Sullivan do a lot of campaign to the West Indian diaspora. I've seen him go to the roti shops, as we said. I've also seen him go to the yajinas as well. So I admire the outreach that he's done to the community, and we thank him for coming on and wish him all the best.
You know what? I can't believe I forgot, but I believe tomorrow is the start of Diwali.
Yes, the start of Diwali. You see how much he knows.
Diwali, yeah, Diwali.
Yeah.
So I apologize for getting that, but it just reminded me that today was Wednesday. But since I won't have the opportunity, I wish your listeners good over evil and light over dark, and peace for your holiday. Thank you for Diwali for those who celebrate.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Happy Diwali to you too. It shows you how much he knows about the community and our background and our holidays. He took the time to wish you a happy Diwali there just now. Mr. King, since you just joined in, we thank Mr. Sullivan for his contribution. Mr. King, I'll give you a chance to contribute. Any opening remarks you may have. Our focus tonight is on the elections and the role of the West Indian diaspora. As you know, we have a very large West Indian community here in New York, especially in your area of South Queens. But unfortunately, that community has had low voter turnout in the past, and we want to encourage them to get out and vote. We want to do it in a nonpartisan way. Encourage you to get out and vote. But obviously, Mr. King will tell you more about his campaign and why he would encourage you to vote for him. And before I turn to him, I'll say I think we have a map of his congressional district as well. And it'll show you most of South Queens that he covers. And if you go to vote in that area, or you reside in that area, you're a citizen, you vote in that area, you will see his name on the ballot there. So as you see, it's most of South Queens there. You got the Rockaways, Howard Beach, Osmond Park, South Jamaica, Canberra Heights, all of that area there. And any of our listeners, or if you have family members in that area, which I'm sure a lot of you do, you can encourage them to get out and vote. Early voting has already begun. As we were saying earlier, it's open at Resource World Casino, the Richmond Hill Library, York College, and then obviously you have Election Day as well on November 5th. But without further ado, I'll give Mr. King a chance to give his get out the vote message.
Well, good evening, Rusat. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to jump right in by just piggybacking on what Tom Sullivan was saying. It is so important this election to go out there and vote your values, to make your voice heard for yourself, your family, and your community. I'm not one who, markets in hyperbole a lot when it comes to elections. This is the most important election ever, but there's so much on the line here. And I think what Tom said about, the attempts by some people who are in government or in power or on the other side, so to speak, to want to push down religion or push down values or push it away from our kids, our traditions and our values, is stronger than ever. We see it in proposal number 1 on the ballot in New York State. We see what's going on in our schools, and now's the time to step up. And when it comes to the Guyanese community, the Indo-Caribbean community, really the Indian community as a whole, when you're including people from Pakistan and Bangladesh and Mumbai, etc. On that map that you showed, there are so many voters who are those swing voters, and to your point, Rusat, who don't always vote a lot, but they're the people who can decide the election. You come out And if you think things need to change, or think we need to, protect our children from some of the things that are being done in government, now's the time to speak up. And there are enough votes there in your community to bring change about. If you don't participate, then the same old will continue. The same formulas, that these gerrymander districts that keep certain people in power, we won't get any change. But your community has the power to make the change if you show up. I mean, if you agree with us that change is necessary, when it comes back to, again, voting your values, voting for what you believe is right for your family and what you think is, as Tom put it in connection with Diwali, it's good versus evil. What's the right thing to do? And here's your choice. Here's your chance to voice that. So this weekend you can celebrate Diwali, and on Tuesday, if you haven't voted yet, you can put those values into action and say, this is the type of world we want to live in, or the type of country we want to live in. So that's my appeal to vote. I can't win without you. That's the other part of the vote. If you come out, I can win and represent you. If your community does not participate, then the math will be the same math that it always is, and we'll keep going down the wrong pathway.
Thank you, Mr. King. And the joke that I love to make, especially based on his name, is the West Indian community may not be the kings, but they can be the king makers in races like those that involve Mr. King. Mr. Baldi, I'll throw it back to you. And any comments you may have on what was previously discussed, but also, we were talking earlier about making sure people know what they're voting for, right? And know the offices they vote for president, et cetera. But when they go and vote for, state assembly, we're talking about how state assembly can impact issues like crime. Mr. King is running for Congress. When they run for offices like Congress, that can have effect on your life in different ways as well that we may not realize until later. And the reason I'm asking you that question in particular, we have a lot of listeners, particularly at the Guyanese community, who would remember the 2020 election in Guyana. And there was a lot of activism in this area because a lot of the Guyanese who live over here, they're more focused on Guyana politics than the actual politics in the US where they live. But when that crisis was going on in Guyana then, and that Guyanese community needed activists to help get stuff done, one of the things that they had to do was reach out to, for example, the State Department or members of Congress to try to have their voices heard so that the US government could take a position on what was going on there and try to have an impact. And I know that you were involved with your activism in that as well. So I wanted to direct that towards you. You can give your comments on anything that you've heard so far, but also talk about the importance of races like Congress and how that can come back to be very important later for this community, especially as we approach elections in Guyana next year as well, which I know you know a lot about and you're familiar with.
Oh, well, of course. I mean, the previous candidates is in the state with the deal with state issues. Of course, Mr. King is also trying in the federal field. That is also very important. Probably one of the most important and consequential seats from our point of view of our community, and we're happy to make a bridge with him. Because elections, it's always an open thing that you keep a good relationship, bipartisan with him. He's been very active in the community. I appreciate that in him, and he's got to know us and so forth. Of course, as a Democratic district leader, I can't endorse Mr. King, but I can tell him I do have and I welcome him, and I do have a lot of respect for him, and we have to continue to work together, which he has. I've always seen him in the community. So when it comes to issues like Social Security, and there may be the threat that might be threatened, he would be one such representative who could stand up, even if we have to do that to the president or the speaker, and said, no, I'm opposing this. We need to do this if it comes up. When it comes to issues like immigration reform and have a proper system of immigration to fix a broken system, he can also weigh in there and said, well, we need to do it orderly, bring the best and the brightest, and let's have secure our borders. And also in any walk of life, I mean, the federal government has the big purse, giving out funds, allocating money to our senior centers, to our schools, to just about every area, even in the census and the redistricting and all these different things. He would be most instrumental in that. And you made a very good point there, Rusat, with Guyana's situation. Being that he has so many Guyanese constituents, it is inconceivable that any candidate who runs will turn their back on Guyana, and hence is where Mr. King could be very, very helpful indeed. Congressman Meeks has been very active in that area. He's been very, I don't find any problems with him there, but of course there must be continuity. So we're invested in folks who can know of Guyana, know of its situations, know of the Venezuelan threat, and who, without any sort of initiation, knows what the issue is. And I'm sure he knows that we would be asking him to defend the Guyana's territorial rights and sovereign integrity against the Venezuelan threats, against that madman, the dictator Nicolas Maduro. And this is where having this bridge with him is most vital for the continuity of the process. I must say, with credit to Republicans, Mr. Mike Pompeo did help Guyana quite much, quite a lot. As a matter of fact, his office, I didn't get to speak to him personally, but I got to speak to his staff many times, and they were always on the ball. They were not lying about that. They were definitely doing it. As you know, he did go to Guyana. He did help Guyana stop substantially in the threat against Guyana. We thank him very much for that. And it just goes to show, Rusat, we cannot put our eggs in one basket. We cannot just be blinded and say, oh, we're going to just support this person because, they talk good things about us. We have to be very strategic in our way of life, though. We've been burnt, we've been thrown on the bus, we've been dumped, we've been kicked around, and we have learned that we've got to think. And it's good that you, a member of the Republican Party from our community, has risen to a level where you have this influence. So we're not just having one person as a Democratic leader myself, but we have you as a leader in the Republican Party, because this is how politics works. You have to have support, you have to have a influence into both arms of government, because they're the two most powerful parties. And I don't think anyone should hold that against us, that if we, as a development community that does not yet reach a threshold of empowerment and recognition and representation, strategically makes that play with both parties, in the sense that we want to work together, we want to work for our best interests, and we don't want to alienate ourselves from either party. That makes political sense. And I would urge everyone out there to vote for who you want to be in office. Vote for your conscience. And like Mr. Sullivan said, don't be intimidated. Don't be scared of anything. You exercise who you think is best going to represent you, who has your interests at heart, who has been with you, who knows your issues, who's been in your neighborhoods, who's working with you, and you've had the experience how candidates have related to you. So definitely, this is a step in the right direction, that we should be substantially involved in the politics of these large parties and be part of them and be able to bring peace and work together. Of course, this doesn't compromise our allegiance to whatever party we belong, but of course we have to be very, street smart, so to speak, in order to survive and to bring home the bacon to, well, I just use the word bacon. I shouldn't be using that term because that's not a term to use, but to bring home the bread to our community, to break bread with others, and to be with everyone. And I want to wish everyone a happy Diwali on behalf of the entire panel also. And this is a time of peace and triumph of light over darkness. And if we're going to have light, then we have to have light in the entire room, not only from one room. And from that point of view, I wish Mr. King well. A name like King is a very electable name, I can tell you that. And he has been doing the work. So my best regards to you, Mr. King. I've seen you around, and I respect your work, and I wish you all the best, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Baldeo. And, if I could just respond to a couple of the points you're making, which I think are important. One is, you know me, Rusat knows me. A lot of people have gotten to know me over the last couple of years, but I think every voter, should put me through the paces. I'm not, if you look and to about what I say, what I've written over the years, it's pretty clear who I am. It's not someone who's telling you what you want to hear right now. But, when you run into someone on the street, sometimes you only have 20 or 30 seconds. And they might say, hey, that was a great interaction. But, dig deep to make sure I'm the right guy, because I'm confident that I am. And so I definitely want your vote. But this isn't, that the relationship is a long-term relationship, even though I don't want to go to Congress for very long. I just want to solve problems. And as I tell people, I want to hand the keys to the next generation. If it takes me 2 or 3 terms, that's max for me. And then it's got to be people like Rusat who pick up the ball from there. I'll fix some of the things my generation broke, and then we turn it over to the younger guys. And that's why we'll be working, regardless of what happens in my election, with Rusat and with other people in the Guyanese community to build more political clubs there on the Republican side. So, and as you said, Albert, it's not, like a battle between the Republican club and the Democratic club. It's just another way of getting people involved. Because if you're on the sideline, you're not able to have candidates, or maybe the politicians aren't paying enough attention to you because they don't think your folks are going to vote enough. So we need to grow the participation so that your voices are heard and you're part of making big decisions. And I think that's an important thing I want to work on, hopefully as a congressman, but either, regardless of whether I'm congressman or not, this is something that needs to happen right there in the heart of Queens. And, I will support that going forward because I think it's important.
Thank you, Mr. King, and I want to thank Mr. Baldi for his comments earlier, and in general, thank you for his participation in the panel, because you see a lot of magnanimity in Mr. Baldi and his willingness for working across party lines, which is something that you don't really see too often in politics nowadays. So I thought that that's something that I wanted to commend as well. I want to focus back on what Mr. Baldi was saying on the issue of Guyana and why it's important to have people from both parties involved in that, right? For the Guyanese community, Guyana cannot become a partisan issue. And the examples that I use, if you look at how diaspora groups within American politics have had their issues heard as well. If you look at, I think the most successful examples are the Irish American community or the Jewish American community. They were able to work within both parties to make sure that the issues concerning Northern Ireland and the Irish interests at the time, or the issues concerning Israel, they were able to get support from both parties. So no matter who was in power of Congress or the presidency, they had a platform to have their voice or their interests heard. And that's so important for the issues facing Guyana as well, whether it's related to elections or Venezuela, that whether a Republican is in the White House or the Congress, or a Democrat is in the White House or the Congress, that we can get our voices heard. Again, we talked about the 2020 elections time. You had a Republican Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, in control of the State Department, who was able to help resolve the crisis there. You also had different voices in Congress that are very active as well on both the Republican and Democratic sides. And then you had within in this instance, it happened to be the Democratic Party in particular. You have, for example, people like Hakeem Jeffries and Yvette Clarke, who made certain comments that were a bit controversial. Let's just say that. I don't want to revisit the 2020 elections crisis of Guyana, but they made some controversial positions there. And if you want people who make controversial positions to actually become informed and reform those positions, you need to have somebody who has their ear. And the only way you're going to get somebody who has their ear who could potentially reform that position is if you have somebody within their party who is active within the Democratic Party. So like Mr. Baldi is active within the Democratic Party, and Jeffries and Clarke are within the New York Democratic Party as well. So if we have a voice within the New York Democratic Party, you can have somebody who could actually try to tell Jeffries or Clarke, etc., that actually I'm from the Guyanese community. I'm a Democrat in the case of Mr. Baldi, not me. I mean, just give me a hypothetical, Mr. Baldi. And this is actually the situation that's going down there, and this is the concerns of the community, et cetera, et cetera. And that's the way a lot of these conversations can happen behind closed doors, to have the interests of the community represented once you're active within both political parties. And the elections in the U.S. right now can go either way, right? Well, we could be waking up next week with President-elect Trump and a Republican Congress, or we could be waking up next week with President-elect Harris and a Democratic Congress. And if you have a Democratic Congress, someone like Hakeem Jeffries would be the Speaker of the House. And if he has a position on Guyana, that can have a lot of impact if the Democrats win back the Congress. And that's why it's important for people like Mr. Baldi to be involved in the Democratic Party as well, to make sure that the interests of the Guyanese community can be heard on that issue. So I just want to address why it's important to have our interests heard within both parties, and then vice versa. If the Republicans win power and we have a President Trump again, it's important for people like Rousseff or Paul King, who are involved within the Republican Party, to be able to tell the Trump administration, if they're back in power, this is the concern of the Guyanese community on this issue if something were to come up in the future. But
and that's an important point you've made, Rousseff, because we just can't pigeonhole ourselves as Republican or Democrat. It's good to be able to have friends in both sides. As a matter of fact, when I ran, a lot of Republicans supported me. So, and you two Democrats have supported you. So we've got to be able to keep the community, glued together. And, we shouldn't let our differences be the determining factor for our activism or for what we want to achieve. It should be the guiding light of pulling us together, especially at a time like Diwali, where there's unity and light over darkness. So if one thing that this program will teach folks is how we have to be bipartisan and for collective humanity.
Thank you, Mr. Baldy. We fully agreed there. I want to touch on some more issues because it's 8:40 now, so we have about 20 minutes left in the program. I think we may have lost Mr. King briefly there just now. So if you don't see him on your screen,
I'm here, audio only.
Oh, audio. Okay. So but the issues I want to come back to, circle back to, we talked about the general apathy in this area and the lack of turning out to vote. And if you want your voices heard when it comes to, say, Guyana elections or Venezuela, you have to show that you're a solid voting bloc if you want people to pay attention to you. Because if you don't turn out and vote, the people in power aren't going to pay attention to you. They're going to say, these guys don't vote. Why do we need to care about them? But if you, I mean, it's sad to say, but that's the way politics unfortunately works. But if we show that we are a solid voting bloc, and whichever way you end up voting, that's your personal choice. But just coming out to vote, that act in and of itself, showing that this community has such strong numbers, not just in population and presence, but also in voting power and coming out to vote, that will lead to people taking us more seriously and making sure our interests are heard. But unfortunately, we've had a long history of that not happening. And I don't just want to say it. I want to show the issues that we have. So, for example, Devin, I think I sent you the map, the 2023 voter analysis that was made by the New York City government, which shows a map of New York City. And if you look at that map of New York City, it'll show that, yeah, right there. So it'll show, for people who are familiar with the map of Queens, that big white spot in Queens. White being the lowest voter turnout and blue being the most solid voter turnout. So we see areas of Manhattan, the Upper West Side, Upper East Side, they have the most solid voter turnout. North Queens has a very solid voter turnout. South Brooklyn has a solid voter turnout. The areas with white have the least voter turnout. And if you look at it, the area with a lot of white, the least voter turnout in New York City is that little white hole in South Queens right there. And that happens to be the South Ozone Park, Richmond Hill, Little Guyana community. We have the lowest voter turnout in New York City, one of the lowest voter turnouts in New York City. So if we want to be taken more seriously as a community, have resources delivered to us, we have to get those numbers up. And this is not just an issue that was there in 2023. We have some articles from the New York Times, which, Devin, if you could pull up the one that talks about 100,000 Guyanese, and that how resources don't really go to them. Yeah, the Guyanese. This is an article from 1996, so nearly 30 years ago. The New York Times was covering this, that the Guyanese population swelled to 100,000 in Richmond Hill, Ozone Park, and Jamaica, but that the needs for resources, be it job training centers or to pave roads or other things, went to other power bases rather than the Guyanese area or the West Indian area. And part of that is because they didn't vote as much, right? And that's why we had a lack of social programs that was talked about there. But that issue hasn't changed from then to now, because unfortunately the community is still has that pattern of low turnout and not being interested. And I think we have another piece of that article as well, which talks about them being more interested in politics back home rather than politics here. Which that even though that they've come decades ago and worked hard for economic foothold, we're very active in the business community, etc. But we've devoted little effort to local politics, preferring to keep track of politics back home. And this was an article written by the New York Times 30 years ago, but it could have been written just yesterday about this community. So, Mr. Baldi, I think you have possibly more, on the ground experience of politics in this area than maybe anyone. What are your thoughts on how the apathy has just continued? Right, this is an article from nearly 30 years ago. You nearly won in that state senate race nearly 20 years ago, but that this sort of apathy has just continued since. Just curious your thought on that lasting issue.
Yes, let me address the audience there, who's mainly Caribbean, South Asian. We have got to do better than this. The map that Rusat has shown you shows the areas that voted most are the most influential and affluential areas. You have Bayside, and you have many other areas, Howard Beach, Glendale, you have the Upper East Side. These areas vote, and it's not a coincidence that they're more developed and they get more attention. It is because you have lacked in our civic duty of going out and voting, which is a free franchise and a spiritual divine right that was given to you by the Constitution. Many of you, most of you didn't have that right at home. You never voted. You left your countries and you came here, whether it's from Pakistan or Guyana or Trinidad or wherever you came for a better life. And voting is free. We don't even have early voting in these countries. And yet you can vote early and you have time in which to do that. You have at least 2 weeks where you can go to the poll site and vote early and open till 8 in the evening. You have no excuse. Saturday, Sunday also. And they have so many poll sites. You don't have to line up in these long lines like they have in various other countries. This is the greatest country on earth. And you have come to the greatest country, but you have shortchanged yourself. Running for office doesn't mean that you will empower Roussat or Baldio or Mr. King or Mr. Meeks or whosoever is there, or the congressman and so forth. It's empowering yourself, because at the end of the day, they will not listen to you unless you have a voice, unless you make demands, unless you're going to approach them respectfully and ask for things to be done. And politicians are human beings. And I don't mean this to Mr. King or anybody else. Politicians look at where the votes are. They look at where the support comes from. And if you don't become a player in this, then you're wasting your time in America. You're depriving yourself. You're cutting yourself off at the legs and truly living the American dream. This is not only about money and prosperity. This is about your children's future. This is about your own development and progress here. Money cannot buy influence and power. In most cases like this, representation does. You have to have representation. You have to have a repay of your tax dollars. That is mean you got to be involved. You got to encourage others to vote, and you've got to go out and vote. The numbers we have are atrocious, and it's a grave disservice to our community, and we ought to be ashamed of ourselves. You've got to go out and show, because you know what? The numbers do come out. The statistics today, they draft the map like Roussat showed you, and they shared the maps. We are white in this area, meaning that we have not even scratched the surface. Other areas are blue, meaning that they have voted and they have made their imprint on the map of America. And that is where it counts. It comes from city, council, from state assembly, state senate, the government, the presidency, or anything that occurs in America, where they build schools, where they give jobs, where they give wages, where they give more police patrols, give more policemen to police these areas, give holidays to the people there. Look, for Diwali, we had to struggle 20 years until we finally got it. So what I'm saying to you simply is this. Everything is related to your vote. Many folks said, oh, you know what we gonna vote for? What we gonna vote for this person for? That is all rubbish. You are talking nonsense. You have to go out and vote. Voting does not cost you. Like I said, sometimes we think in order to feel there's value in something, you have to put on top dollar. Nobody's asking you for top dollar. Nobody's even asking you for a single dollar, not a dime. And you need to have the common sense to know that you have to go out and vote, because voting is your right. Voting is your power. You need to go out and vote, and proudly do that. And when it comes to things in Guyana, nobody's saying you mustn't be aware of Guyana and its leaders and so on, and support who you want. But charity begins at home. You live in America. You want to see your homes are not foreclosed. You want to see churches built. You want to see schools built. You want to see hospital schools. You want to see policemen patrolling the streets. That comes with your vote, and it's free. So all I'm asking you and begging you at this time of Diwali, to throw light over darkness, to have faith, to exercise your franchise, to lead by example, to go out and vote. Spend those 5 minutes and go out and vote. Go to Resorts World. Go to the Richmond Library. Go to Queensborough Hall. Go to all the centers. Look it up online. They're all around. Put in your zip code. And then if you didn't make it, then go out and vote on that day. Because no more should you be saying, look at Liberty Avenue. It's overspilling with garbage. There's no cans there to put in garbage. They don't even pick up the garbage sometimes, you know. For you to get the mayor's attention is to ask them, what have you done for me? What have you done for me, Mr. Mayor? What are you doing for me? You know, now Mr. King has spent his time coming to this community, and we're grateful for that, because people now see politicians running for office have got to make the pilgrimage to Richmond Hill. It spent a long time, 3 decades of work and fighting and registering voters and trying to bring it to this level. And now we have to make sure that we can take this to the highest level, where we can be, in order for us to be true Americans, we have to go out and vote because our children fight and die for this country. We are great patriots. We pay our taxes. We have an equal stake like everybody. So like Cruzat always says, don't complain if you don't vote. Shut your mouth, so to speak, in Guyanese parlance. Don't complain if you don't vote. You have to go out and vote. It's free. You have a duty, and you must do it. You're the ones going to be benefit. People are not going in there. The candidate just said he's not going in there for a lifetime. He's already had a career, but he wants to give back. Everybody, folks like us want to give back. So you must go out and exercise your franchise and make sure that you do your civic duty and vote, because voting is what alienates you. What empowers you. Many people have died for the right to vote. There was a time when you couldn't even vote. You could not even think of voting because you were a minority. And now that you have that right, don't complain. You have sidelined yourself and categorized yourself as a Dalit or an untouchable. You have put yourself in the lowest caste because by refusing to vote, you have condemned yourself to a life of failures, a life of not being heard, not being seen. And America was built on a participating democracy. Get off the fence and vote. Democracy is not a spectator sport, Guyanese people. Go out and vote and help us to have a better and stronger community.
Thank you, Mr. Baldio. Now, just to add on to a few things that Mr. Baldio addressed, he mentioned Diwali. Obviously, we wish a happy Diwali to everyone who will be celebrating. And I want to highlight that this year is actually the first year that Diwali will be a public school holiday in New York City, and that is the result of years of community activism. So that is something that we wanted to note as well. Now, Mr. Baldio made a very important point just now that we have, for the first time in I think many years, or we have members of both parties coming out, reaching out to this community. And that is the sign of how a community can grow in its political power, and also, getting resources for itself as well. When a community shows that it's potentially a swing area that can go either way, or that both parties have to reach out to, both parties will put attention into it, and eventually, over time, put resources into it. And that is something that this community needs, because when it's only in the hands of one and can be taken for granted, you don't get all the resources that you may want. Like if we think on the national level, if you're in a solid blue state, how many times does the president come out to you? If you're in a solid red state, how many times does that president go out to you and deliver for you? But if you're in one of those swing states, like what Florida used to be, or let's say Pennsylvania and Michigan and others are now, the presidents or presidential candidates are there all the time, promising all sorts of resources to them, because they know that, those people are going to vote. They can tip the election either way, and I need them, so I need to give resources to them. And within New York, where we have such a strong West Indian diaspora, we can be that swing community that can get resources because of our political power and attention, because we have the strength in numbers. We just have to use it. We have the potential to be a Goliath, but we're acting like a David. So well I'll we can give Mr. King the chance. It's 8:52 and our program goes till 9. So we'll start to wrap up slowly. But I want to give Mr. King the chance to give a final get out the vote message to this West Indian community. What are the issues you want them to focus on, and why they should cast their ballot for Paul King in South Queens this year. So, Mr. King, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And then as soon as I'm done, I'm gonna jet, because I also have to be somewhere at 9 o'clock. But first off, I want to compliment Mr. Baldio. That was eloquent and passionate and important. This is kind of the divine right to vote that comes from our Constitution, but our rights also, we all say, come from God. We don't want to take them for granted. And the point you made about politicians being human, I don't think I fall into this category because I'm not a career politician, but and I don't like to excuse what I consider as bad behavior. But, when Gregory Meeks was an assemblyman way back when, my dad went to him as a community leader and said, we have this high unemployment here in Far Rockaway, and here's a transportation program that'll help your people right here. So, sometimes people think, politicians look at everyone, the color of someone's skin or their ethnicity, and they're biased that way. Well, this is a community of Black people, and Mr. Meeks, as an assemblyman, said to my dad, Jack, I know you're right, but people in Far Rockaway don't vote and they don't make campaign contributions. And the people who do vote and do make contributions want me to do something different. Now, that's a horrible view of politics, but it's because the people who represent us are human or want to keep their jobs, sometimes they make those choices. And, you never want to be that group that's taken for granted. I think you already know that you are that group that's being taken for granted. I like what we want to build here in the future, but right now, I'm hoping you'll give me a chance to be a representative and show that someone who does care can do things differently, who's a professional problem solver, will go at the cost of living, will go at the problems with our schools, problems with crime, the things that are holding family back from living your best lives or from living your American dream. These are things I know a lot about because of my professional career outside of politics and solving systemic problems. And I'm a civic leader who's used to being in the community. That's why I'm so comfortable being in the community, in your community, and getting to know people, spending time listening and learning rather than coming in thinking I've got a big voice and a cape and all the answers. I've spent my time getting to know people and getting to understand your culture and appreciating it, which what makes me want to be successful on your behalf even more. So if you give me a chance this year, I don't think you'll be disappointed, and I will stay in contact. It won't be, I'm gone and, I'll come back in 2 years asking for your vote again. We're going to work together to make things better, not just for us, but for our children and grandchildren. And, when I'm done, hopefully Rusad or someone else from your community will be taking the torch and going down to DC in my place. That's my mission, to make it work for us, work for our families, our children, our grandchildren, and then pass the torch. On that note, I'm going to hand it back to you, Rusad, and I have to get out of the car. But thank you. Happy Diwali to everyone. And thank you, Mr. Baldeo, for your contributions tonight as well.
Thank you, Mr. King. We really appreciate your time. And as you see, he was dedicated enough, even though he's still on the campaign trail, he made the time to come on the program. It's the final few days before the election, so all these candidates, they're trying to get out to as many places as possible, reach as many people as possible. But I really thank Paul King for his outreach to the West Indian community. I've seen him do a lot of outreach, from going to the Pagwa parade to even going to various events within the community, and spending a lot of time with us. So I appreciate all his outreach, all his efforts. He came on this program several times before, even on the Guyana Venezuela issues or other topics related to Guyana. So we thank him for his time tonight and for his outreach in general, and we wish him all the best in the upcoming election. So thanks again, Mr. King. We'll let you go and get back to the campaign trail. Mr. Baldeo, I'll give you the chance to give your final summation, any final thoughts and comments you have on the issues we talked about tonight, and also the overall topic, the upcoming elections and the role of the West Indian community diaspora in those elections.
Oh, yes, definitely. What you've seen here tonight is how we have to work together for our community's benefit. That is invoking the bipartisan connections that we have, and hopefully from God's ear, from Mr. King's lips to God's ears, that Rusat will eventually be a congressman or someone, and many others would follow on that footsteps, and we can have representation. And hence, I think this is a very important step in our community. Being on the same program with two Republican candidates doesn't mean that I endorse them or that I am against their opponents, Ms. Pfeffer and Congressman Meeks, whom we know for a very long time has been good to Guyana. What we're doing here is building a base or building camaraderie, so that politics is a dynamic field, and we have got to be, and very importantly so, the kingmakers. And as Rusat said, kingmakers mean that we have to be sought after. We have to be able to use our influence in such a way that we can draw attention to our plight, our issues, our solutions, and our problems. And there's no better way of doing that than doing it through political struggle. Now, political struggle doesn't mean that we've got to hate Republicans, we've got to hate Democrats. No, it doesn't mean that. It means we have to join hands and work together as a universal message of Diwali simplifies: triumph of good and unity over evil. And that is a lesson that we have seen, and I hope the audience appreciates this, that it should not be fighting amongst who's supporting who in political circles. It must be, how can we work together? How can we solve our problems? How can we have better hospitals? How can we have better educational institutions? How can we have better jobs? How can we prevent COVID from bringing our kids and our family from dying and burying them in unmarked graves in Potter's Field? How can we have a senior center when we don't have to see two sole white men in the room with their seniors, and they just happen to be the elected people who gives resources to these city centers, who hold the keys to the kingdom, who determines who gets what, and who gives all the resources to all the communities and don't give us a penny. That is what this is about. Each politician that we elect comes with a bag of gold, or resources, pork money, money that he can give out, called like discretionary funding, and we don't get any. We don't get any from the city council. We don't get any state assembly. We don't get any state senate. We don't get any in Congress. We need people to say that our community has arrived. It is thriving. It is not only Little Guyana on a map. Google Little Guyana, you will see we are prominently a place in New York City, and that we demand more resources, and that we will pick up that phone and call the U.S. Secretary of State, whether Republican or Democrat, to help Guyana. And that is why we've got to align our focus also with our lives in America. We have to. You cannot just only look out for Guyana. We look out for Guyana and we look out for democracy there, but we've got to look out for ourselves here. Having a house and having a car and a big bank account doesn't mean empowerment. Like I said, you've got to prove that and show that. And we are just temporary. We are just passing through here. We're just trying to help the situation. But we have to have a very permanent structure in place that's called empowerment for South Asians, Guyanese, Little Guyana, Little Bangladesh, Little India, Little Trinidad, Little Surinamese. All of us must come together, and even with Italians and Jews and blacks and everybody else must come together over a common cause, and that is the future of our families and our children and of our stake in America, and also in making sure that we too can live the American dream. Because you just can't sit on the sidelines. You just cannot categorize yourself as second-class citizens. You have seen how second-class citizens are treated. We have seen enough. We never had any COVID. COVID taught us that. We were the last. We had the most. No attention. We had the worst cases of death. We had the highest number of COVID incidents, and no one did anything about it. All the elected officials that serve this area closed their offices. That is not good enough. It meant that we didn't matter. They didn't care about us. So that is a wake-up call. Now you've got to put yourselves on the map. You've got to have an office here. You've got to be able to get unemployment insurance, just about everything, jobs, wages, schools, and so forth. And as Rousseau has always said, don't complain. Don't complain when you don't vote. As a matter of fact, many of you see us and say you vote. We can check whether you vote. It is a public record to say you can vote. Many of you tell me, oh yeah, mommy, vote for you. Me and my whole family vote for you. You know what? When I checked, none of you in your family voted for anybody. And that's a shame. So, enough is enough. Stop this. Get involved. That is your most divine and fundamental right. That is your most valuable right in America. Go out and vote. It's not about Albert Baldio. It's not about Rusat Ramgopal. It's not about anybody else. It's for you that you have to go out and show your power, because your voice is your power. And if you want to run for office, then go and run. Put aside your money, the time, and the sacrifices. Tell your wife and your family will not see you for a year, and we will need $100,000 minimum. If you can appreciate what people do for you, then you go and run. If you can't go and run, then go and vote and follow the leader. Because if you don't, then this community will always be crying out, and you will be ashamed unto yourself. But those of you that vote, I compliment you. You've done well. Continue to vote. Tell your neighbor to vote, your family, all of you go and vote. Just like we celebrate Diwali. As we light the diya, you like to vote in that ballot box. It's the same light and triumph over darkness that you are lighting. Remember this, the diya and everything else, all the lights, because I know I'm not only speaking to Hindus, but also the Muslims and Christians and Jews and everybody else. Light the vote. Light up the vote. Or as the LGBTQ communities does say, Rusat, mash up the vote. They use the term mash up the vote. So make sure you go out and vote.
Thank you, Mr. Baldio, and thank you for all your contributions this evening. We'll wrap up now. Thank you to all our viewers for tuning in. Just a final closing message, and touching what Mr. Baldio said, it's true. This is an under-resourced, underrepresented community, especially it hits us hard during times like COVID, but we have to get out and vote. It doesn't matter which way you vote, as much as it matters that you actually get out and vote in the first place. Perform your civic duty, make your voices heard. Early voting is open right now. It's open throughout this weekend as well at sites like Resorts World Casino, Yale College, Richmond Hill Library in the area. And then regular election day on November 5th, your local school will most likely be your voting site, but also maybe your local library as well, depending where you live. You can check out what your voting site is at the Board of Elections website in New York City. So please, we just encourage you, get on and vote, make sure that the role of the West Indian diaspora is heard in the upcoming elections here. We just want to wish happy Diwali and happy Halloween as well tomorrow to all our viewers. Thank you once again for tuning in. We really appreciate it, and we hope you all have a